All right, awesome. I have Eamon here. Eamon, you have quite an interesting story that you want to share with the audience, and quite many topics that we're going to touch upon. But before we go in there, I just want you to have a chance to introduce yourself and tell us what was your experience with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, hello, Jack. Thank you for inviting me on your channel. I really appreciate it. So I'll just give you a little brief outline of my early life, my family, and how I came in contact with the witnesses. So you might have noticed, first of all, I've got an unusual name. So I came into this world with the name Mullarkey. So my life was never going to be easy after that. That was my introduction to the world. I was born in England, and as my name suggests, I have Irish parents, and my parents lived most of their life in England. My father wasn't particularly religious. He would prefer to worship at a place where you could get liquid refreshment, if you know what I mean.
Right.
He was fond of alcohol.
Was he a
And
witness?
no, he wasn't. No, my dad grew up in the Roman Catholic faith, like my late mother, but he didn't take the faith particularly seriously. Although, if anyone in the local neighbourhood died, he would very often attend the funeral because there might be a little gathering afterwards. So, but my dad wasn't particularly religious, but he was unfortunately too fond of the alcohol. So growing up as a youngster, I'm the eldest of three. Growing up as a youngster, life was very, very difficult for my mum because there were always financial problems. Always financial problems. He lost many jobs when I was a child. But having said that, he had his own issues. Being fondness for alcohol. But I do owe certain things to my late father because one of my great loves is horse racing. So I'm grateful to him for passing that love on to me because I've learned so much about people and about life from studying horses. So I'm grateful to him for that. And my dad also had a maverick personality. He was the kind of person that if the crowd were going in one direction, he would go in the other. And I'm exactly the same. So I do owe my late father that, his maverick personality. So,
Mm-hmm.
but life wasn't easy for him either. My mother, my mother, again coming from Ireland, grew up in the Roman Catholic faith, but she wasn't. She was my mum. My mum was very, very religious. She didn't go to um, the Catholic Church as such, but I mean, I was born in 1964, so I'm going to be 60 this year. But in the early 60s, my late mother's own mother died, and I think that really tore her up completely. She was struggling to cope,
Mm.
and when she was at her most vulnerable, the witnesses, as far as I'm aware, called on her in London and began a Bible study. So my mum did Bible studies with the witnesses over about 4 decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And she was the one that taught me as a teenager about God's kingdom, the paradise, Armageddon, everything else. And because I'm a bit of an idealist, a dreamer, that's the kind of people have often told me that I'm an idealist, a dreamer. And I imagined a world where there was no more wars, no more sickness, no more hunger, no more poverty. So when mum was explaining these things to me as a teenager, it really appealed to me. And that's how I first got interested in the witnesses, although it was much later when I was 28 years of age that I was actually baptized. But my mother was always the religious one. She was personality wise, she was quiet, she was sensitive, but she was very hardworking, very, very caring. So I think my gentle, sensitive nature I owe to my mother, and the religious side of my personality I owe to my brother, to my mother as well. Regarding my siblings, I'm the eldest of three.
Okay.
My late brother, my younger brother, unfortunately inherited the love of alcohol from my dad. But with my brother, it was much worse because my brother died from cirrhosis of the liver. I mean, at his worst, he would be drinking like 2 bottles of brandy a day. It was horrendous, and tremendous pressure put on the family with financial problems, etc. And not only was he an alcoholic, he had mental health issues as well. I think he was schizophrenic, and he tried to stab me to death on 2 occasions. And he was put in prison for the 2 attacks on me.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, on hundreds of occasions, on hundreds of occasions, my brother said to me that he was going to put me in a wooden box. I heard that many, many
Wow.
times. I'm going to put you in a wooden box. But unfortunately, my brother got the wooden box before I did. So he died 10 or more years ago now. But again, the positive side to my brother, although he had an issue with alcohol and he had mental health problems, he was extremely intelligent. And when you saw the nice side of his personality, he was a really, really nice person, very intelligent, and I do miss him as I miss my parents, So my parents have passed away now, my brother's passed away. So as I said, I'm the oldest of three. My sister is still alive, and she has been very, very supportive to me over the years. She's a very, very hard worker, and she knows my personality, that I am sensitive by nature, and with the various trials and tribulations I've had, she's always been there for me. So I can only thank my sister and her family for the kindness that they've shown me over the years. She's always been there for me. But
So she became a witness as well.
no, she didn't. She didn't. No, my sister is religious, because I think, like myself as a teenager, she was listening to Mum talking about God's kingdom, the paradise, Armageddon. So my sister had a knowledge of, the material from the witnesses when she was young as well. But I'm the one that went on to become a witness. I'm the only one in the family that ever became a witness. So regarding my contact with the witnesses, as I say, my mum revealed these things to me about God's kingdom, the paradise, Armageddon, when I was a teenager. I was then baptized at the age of 28. And the study didn't take very long. I only studied for about 8 months with a pioneer sister. And it was very, very quick, because as far as I was concerned, it was the truth. So baptized at age 28, I served as a regular pioneer for a couple of years. And then later on, I served as a regular auxiliary pioneer. And I went on to the ministerial training school in 1998, which is more than 25 years ago.
Oh,
but,
wow.
but basically, my life in connection with Jehovah's organization, you could describe it as a long chapter and a short chapter. So the first one, the long chapter, was a period of 12 years. So my first spell with the organization, the long chapter, 12 years. Then I was away from the organization for 16 years. And then the next time,
How come?
well, that's the time that my brother was being violent, causing chaos in my family, trying to kill me, 2 knife attacks on me, so there was, and my mum got ill. My mum got ill during that time as well. I was a carer for my mum for 8 years. There was violence from my brother trying to kill me. So there was, as I say, so I started off with a long chapter when I was with Jehovah's Witnesses for 12 years. Then I was away for 16 years. And then I returned in 2020 for 3 years.
I'm
But
assuming you were not this fellowship. You just kind of
no.
stopped going.
I just drift. I think, in all honesty, Jack, I just got overwhelmed by the problems,
Right.
just overwhelmed. My brother was so violent, so violent. And I, again, looking back, I don't know, was Satan using him to get at me? But my brother was extremely violent, tried to stab me to death on a couple of occasions. He was put in prison for the 2 knife attacks on me. And as I just said a moment ago, he told me on hundreds of occasions he was going to put me in a wooden box. So I had that violence to deal with. So, two periods with the witness, 12 years, then a 16-year break. Then I went back for 3 years. And you might remember 3 years or so ago, there was a lot of chaos going on in the world with a certain virus and lockdowns and everything
Yes.
else. And I went through a major crisis then at like the autumn of 2020, because I could see all the chaos going on around me in the world. And I was thinking of all the Bible prophecies, Satan hurled out of heaven, woe for the earth and for the sea, the
Right.
devil is down to you. And I could see all this chaos going on in the world.
Right.
And, I returned to the organization in the autumn of 2020. It was only 3 years the next time. But I'll just tell you one strange experience, that when I was going through that crisis 3 years ago, I don't know if you've ever been to London,
No.
but there's a lovely park in London called Regent's Park. And at the height of the lockdowns and all the chaos 3 years ago, I went up to Regent's Park in London. I sat on one of the benches by the lake, just to think But on that one occasion, I brought a Bible with me, which I wouldn't normally do. I brought a Bible with me, and I read Hebrews chapter 11, all the men and women of faith down
Hmm.
through the ages. And I put my glasses on to read the Hebrews chapter 11. It took about 5 minutes. And then when I'd read Hebrews chapter 11, I took my glasses off, and I'm sitting on a bench in Regent's Park. And I looked up, and directly in front of me was a rainbow. I just could not believe what I was seeing. I thought, am I hallucinating? There's a rainbow right in front of me. And even to this day, I cannot explain why that happened. But I took it as a sign. I took it as a sign that Jehovah was telling me, return to the organization.
Interesting.
Rightly or wrongly, I don't know. So, so as I say, just to recap again, 12 years with the organization the first time, what I call a long chapter. Then I was away for 16 years.
Yeah.
Then I went back for 3 years, the short chapter, and then I disassociated last month. So that sort of gives you a little idea of my family, my early life, how I came in contact.
You said
with
last month?
Last month,
Oh,
December.
you're fresh.
December.
Welcome. I thought it was longer last month. Wow, that's
Last month, December the 19th. So
wow.
it's all
So, well,
forgive
I think
me, forgive
everybody
me.
has the same question on their minds, like what caused it? What made you to switch?
Well, when I went back the second time, as I say, the 12 years the first time, which is the long chapter, and the 3 years the second time, the short chapter, the organization felt very, very different the second time, because the first time it felt like a family of sincere people who were trying to bring Bible truth to people in the neighborhood. It
Yeah.
felt very different the first time back in the 90s and like early 2000s. The second time I went back, the alarm bells were ringing very early on. I think this feels like a cult because it was so highly controlled.
Interesting.
And as I say, the second chapter was only 3 years. And as I tried so hard the second time to make it work, but it didn't. It was an absolute nightmare.
Can
And
you can you give me an example of where you saw that this time around was more controlling than 16 years ago?
I've got a whole list of things in my notes here. So you'll probably see me glancing down at my notes every now and
Okay.
again, because
So we'll get
there's a whole list of things I'll come on to in a little while. But early on, I mean, obviously the organisation had moved on by the time I went back. You had JW Broadcasting, and you had all the mobile phones and tablets and iPads. And
right.
I'm a bit of a technophobe, so it was all a massive shock to me. I remember going back thinking, this is nothing like the organization I joined in the 1990s. It felt very, very different. But as I say, there are a few points that I'll outline a little bit later on.
Cool. So tell me, what were some of the issues that you had to deal with after
Well,
you rejoined?
well, the number one issue in my life has always been singleness, because I mean I'm going to be 60 this year, and it's always been my lifelong dream to find a companion, a marriage partner. But to my great sadness, it just hasn't happened.
I don't
Uh,
understand why. You have a perfect haircut just like me. So
I think we share the same hairdresser.
I did get married before I lost you, so maybe that's why. I don't
Well,
know.
I think one or many of my various jobs removed my hair, but yeah,
Was
but
there any other reason rather than
well,
the
as I
loss of
say, but
hair?
the singleness, I just like to spend a few minutes just discussing it, because
Sure.
I'm going to be 60 this year, and from a teenager, it was always my lifelong dream to meet a nice lady, fall in love, and get married, but it never happened. And I'm just going to mention. I'm not going to mention their names, but I'm just going to mention three young ladies that I came in contact with at different points
Okay.
in my life. When I was at primary school, when I was about 9 or 10 years of age, um, I was sitting at a table where there were four people sitting at the table, two boys and two girls. So I was sitting at one corner of the table. Directly facing me was one of the girls. Immediately to my right was the other girl, and diagonally across from me was the other boy. But the girl that was sitting directly in front of me, and I was only 9 or 10 at the time, the girl sitting directly in front of me, I had a huge crush on her. I was 9 or 10 years of age. Her initials were JW. Unbelievable. You just couldn't make it up. Her initials were JW, and I lost contact with her. I often wonder where in the world she is now.
Your
When I
destiny was waiting for you right
well,
there.
it was amazing. I can't believe, you know, looking back all those 50 odd years now, looking back, you know, her initials were JW. I mean, it's,
You would have ended up with a JW either way. So
well, that's right, but it was bizarre. And then when I was 18 years of age, I met, I think, the most beautiful girl I've ever laid eyes on in my life. She was absolutely stunning. She had the lot, brains, beauty. She was absolutely out of this world. I had a huge crush on her. This is a girl I met when I was 18. Stunningly beautiful. But she was my cousin.
oh,
So nothing has ever gone right. She was my cousin,
right.
the most
Okay.
beautiful. And then a
Scratch
little
that
bit
idea.
like, then a little bit later on, in one of the jobs I did, I met another really beautiful girl who looked like my cousin. Stunningly beautiful girl later on that I worked with, and I remember going out with her on New Year's Eve, walking along the river in London, very romantic. And I remember thinking at the time, this is all a dream, you know. I'm going out with a Hollywood actress here. This is just amazing. But she had the same initials as my cousin, which is, it's almost unbelievable. I'm not going to reveal the initials, but you know, so I've met some nice girls during my life, you know, but I've never met the one that would become a marriage partner, you know.
Okay.
And when I returned to Jehovah's organization the second time, which was only 3 years the second time, I told the elders in the local congregation that singleness was the number one issue in my life. It brought me the most immense sadness that I wanted to meet someone. And I was hoping that the elders in the local congregation would be understanding, compassionate, and kind, but they were exactly the opposite. They were quite cruel and insensitive. And I'll just give you a little idea of some of the things they did to me. There was, again, I'm not going to mention any names, but there was one of the elders that kept sending me WhatsApp messages. You know when the day's text occurs, maybe about singleness or something, and he would deliberately send me the WhatsApp message about singleness, saying, you know, how wonderful singleness is. And
There are some benefits to it, but
I had told them this is the number one issue. I'm really, really sensitive about this. He'd send me, I think, on 3 occasions, like WhatsApp messages, you know, how wonderful singleness is, that, you know, you can devote your life to the Watchtower Society, knocking on doors, etc., etc.
right.
And the third time he did it, I was so hurt by what he did that I had to hit back really, really hard. And I said to him, you know, you sending me all these messages, it's like telling a blind man to enjoy his blindness, you know. And I think the elder was quite shocked at how blunt I was with him, you know. So that was one thing that, you know, revealed to me how uncaring and insensitive they were. And you might be aware of the new study book they've got now, Enjoy Life Forever. There was
I'm
another
not
occasion.
familiar with it. I
Yeah,
left
but
before they
yeah,
started
there's a,
distributing it.
yeah, last year, 2023, they were going through the Enjoy Life book, and there was one of the chapters on singleness in the book. And you know, they've got a brother conducting the item in the meeting, and they've got someone to read for him. This is
Right.
the chapter on singleness, and they picked me to read the paragraphs on the chapter on singleness.
Well, you were single, so
And
they
I was so, because I had told them how sensitive I was about this issue.
yeah.
You know, it meant so much to me to try and meet someone, and I was so hurt when they gave me this assignment. So in hindsight, I should have refused to do it, but I didn't. I went on the platform. I read the paragraphs about singleness, and I felt completely humiliated. I felt my heart broken in two. I felt humiliated in front of the congregation that they've given me this assignment, that I'm basically explaining to everyone how wonderful it is to be singleness. And the people in the audience know that in my case, that was not the way I felt. And
Right.
after the meeting, I was so hurt by what they did to me. You know, I picked up my bag and coat, and I just left the hall in tears, you know. I was just so upset about it, you know. And then there was another occasion where one of the elders gave a talk on a platform, and it touched on singleness. And I remember when he was giving the talk, he looked directly at me in the audience, And you know, I knew the talk was geared towards me. It was directed at me, and he said basically, you know, there's no need to find validation in life by, you know, getting a life partner. You know, it's, you know, that's not going to prove that you have value as a human being, finding a life partner. Why not find validation or prove your self-worth by going out, knocking on doors, speaking to people about the Watchtower Society? And again, I told him at the time, I told him after the meeting how hurt I was by his talk, which was clearly directed at me. And just this little part of my conversation with you, I was just so hurt by how uncaring and insensitive the elders were.
Mm.
That, you know, and I was thinking of the account in the Bible about Hannah. You know, how Hannah desperately wanted a child, didn't she?
Right.
And then, you know, can you imagine if the elders now went out to see Hannah in a modern setting and they'd say to her, well, Hannah, you've got a husband that loves you very much. You've got a nice home. You've got plenty to eat. You've got nice clothes. Why aren't you happy? And then Hannah would say to the elders, I don't think you understand. I do have these things. I do have a husband that loves me. But Hannah would say to the elders in a modern setting, but I desperately want a child. Can't you see that? I desperately want a child. And to apply that account to my case, the singleness has been the number one issue with me. And
Interesting.
the elders just showed complete insensitivity and uncaringness to, if that's the word, they were uncaring towards me.
I
But
think if I can interrupt you for a second,
yeah, sure.
I think the reason, because people who were not in your shoes, or people who were never Jehovah's Witnesses, would not even understand why this hurt you so much, because you know that they couldn't possibly find a marriage mate for you and say, hey, take this person, right? The reason why this is so hurting is because you didn't want to be single person, but they used the fact that you're single for their own benefit by saying, oh, now that you're single, you can do more for Jehovah. Now that you're single, you can do more in service. You can devote your life to the congregation. And that's not what you wanted to do, but they were saying, oh, the fact that you're single, we can use it for the benefit of the congregation. And this is why it's so hurtful, not the fact that you're single, because the fact that you're single, well, many people are single, you wanted to have somebody, you didn't meet somebody. But when you feel that the intent is different, when they're not trying to support you or understand you how you feel, but they're saying, oh, you're single, you're not feeling good about it, but that's okay, we're going to use this for our benefit. That's when inside you're feeling like, oh, these people are so insensitive, right? And I understand this very well, because I remember from a couple was very close to me. The woman found out that her husband, or she had a suspicion that her husband was cheating on her, and she couldn't prove it, but she left him anyways. She didn't divorce at the beginning, but she just decided to move out. And of course, the elders, through a judicial committee on her, not him, on her, gave her a public reproval while he became um, a pioneer. And then they took him and did an interview while she was still in the audience, and he's going up there saying how good that he is single, because now he can do more for Jehovah. And everybody knew the situation, right? So I know that they will use every situation they can for their benefit, even in situation like that. So this is why it's so hurtful to you. And people who are not witnesses, they would not get it. They would not understand what's the big deal, right? Because they're trying to, from the outside, it might seems like, well, you're single. They're trying to show you the best thing for singleness, right? Like why it was encouraging, right? You're single, there's things you can do, there's some benefits of being single, right? Of course there's a lot of guys sleeping on the couch hoping they were single, right? but but it's not about that. It's the fact that they use this situation that you were not happy about for their benefit, and that's what is hurtful.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. I just thought they were so cruel and insensitive. But I'll just move on to the next thing there, Jack. You know, another issue for me was coping with transgender feelings. You know,
Okay.
so I've had to cope with transgender feelings throughout my life. You know, because I think, like my late mother, I've got a gentle disposition. You know, my late father and late brother were quite aggressive. Well, I'm not like that. I've got a gentle, mild disposition, and you know, I've coped with the transgender feelings throughout my life. And if I can just take you back to when I was 8 years of age.
Hmm.
You know, I was in primary school, 8 years of age, and I remember looking at one of the children's reading books when I was 8 years of age, and I remember reading it, and I have this image in my mind of a man climbing to the top of a very high platform, like a diving platform. Man goes to the top of the diving platform, then he dives off the platform into a pool. It wasn't a pool of water. It looked like a pool of fire to my childish imagination. So the man dives off the platform
Okay.
into what looked like a pool of fire. And
Okay.
then I turned over the page in the children's reading book, and that man had turned into a beautiful princess. And I remember as an 8-year-old child, and I have actually traced that book since many years ago. And obviously my childish mind was playing tricks on me. The story wasn't like that, but that's the way I remember it. That the man dived off a platform into this pool of fire or water or whatever it was. Then he turned into a beautiful princess. And I remember as a child thinking how wonderful. And that was my early recollection of transgender feelings. You
Hmm.
know, and it's strange. I mean, obviously, I know the name of that book now. I'm not going to reveal it here, but I know the name of that book. But that's where the transgender feelings, my first recollection when I was 8 years of age, and then obviously I've gone into teenage years, and you know, maybe when my mum wasn't around, I'd try on her lipstick or try her dress or something like that, whenever she wasn't around, and then obviously moving on into my adult life, there were occasions, when I had makeovers and photo shoots. I think you've probably seen some of my pictures on Facebook. You might
Maybe
have done.
I don't recall right now.
Maybe you have, but some of my pictures are on Facebook. And when I was in one of my jobs some years ago, one of my lady colleagues turned around to me and she said, "Eamon, I hate to say this to you, but you're much better looking as a girl than you are as a boy." So she was right. She was right, But so I've had the transgender feelings to deal with throughout my life, and I am very compassionate, and I feel kindness towards other people that have experienced transgender feelings because I've had to deal with it throughout my life. And you might remember from your own time in the organisation, like the JW website, jw.org. If you type in the word transgender to the search facility, there is nothing,
Zero. Zero.
absolutely,
I was shocked.
absolutely, absolutely nothing about
Not one word.
the transgender issue, which is unbelievable. And Jehovah's organization claims to be so caring and kind and compassionate. And the transgender issue is so important to many people around the world. And you can imagine not only in Jehovah's organization, but families around the world where maybe there's a little boy and he speaks to his parents. The little boy speaks to his parents, "Mummy, Daddy, I think I should be a girl." And then in another family somewhere else, there's a little girl that speaks to her parents, "Mummy, Daddy, I think I should be a boy."
Right.
You know, and just think about those children. Those children have never read a book, they've never read a magazine, they've never watched a video, but they have those feelings.
Right.
So, as far as I'm concerned, we should show kindness and compassion to whether it's young people or older people with transgender feelings. And yet, Jehovah's organization, this so called caring organization, will not even address the subject. You type in the word transgender on the jw.org website, and there is absolutely nothing.
Right.
And I told the elders this when I returned the second time to the organisation, and I couldn't see any real compassion as far as they were concerned. Everything's very clear cut. Men are men,
Mhm.
men are men, women are women. There's nothing in between.
Yeah,
You know,
they actually surprised me because it seems like they have a say and opinion upon everything. You know what I mean? To the smallest detail. And on this issue, which is a big issue, especially for people who are still in Jehovah's Witness realm and they're strong believers and they have children who expressing those feelings and they don't know what to do. The only case that I remember from Jehovah's Witnesses is where one man approached the elders and he said that he is going to through the transition and he will transition fully. and he was, you know, he wanted to talk to the elders about it, see what they're gonna say, and the only advice that they gave him is to move from one congregation to another where nobody knows him after the transition,
Wow.
which would automatically mean you're just losing all your friends, right? uh, and that's all what I heard, like, throughout all my years being a witness. But there is no guidelines. There is, as far as I know, there's nothing in the elders book how to address those issues. They're quiet on this. I don't understand why,
And
but
it's such a huge issue. Not only among, I'm sure even within Jehovah's organization, there are families that have to deal with this very important issue.
100%,
Yeah. And
100%.
and the organisation won't address such an important issue, and then there's families around the world that are dealing with this as well. And
It's
I feel tremendous compassion towards those people because I've had to deal with the transgender issue throughout my life, and I can't understand why Jehovah's organisation won't address the issue.
I don't think they know how. There's very little in the Bible that mentions about transgender. The only scripture that I can think of is the one that says, "Oh, if a man wears women's clothing, that's a disgrace for him," or something like that, right? I think it's in Deuteronomy.
I think in my case, as I said earlier on, the number one issue with me has always been singleness because I would love to, even at this, I'm going to be 60 this year, even at this age, I would love to meet someone, maybe somewhere out in the world is a nice lady who would be right for me. But singleness has always been the number one issue. But maybe the transgender feelings are like substitute feelings. I don't really know.
Right.
I'm not a scientific person. I don't understand. But I'll just say one more thing briefly on this. That you know how I felt the elders humiliated me over the singleness issue. I
Mhm.
felt that they did the same over the transgender issue as well, because there was one occasion you probably remember the account in the Bible where the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon,
Mhm.
you know, and because Solomon was the wisest man on the earth, so the Queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon and brought a whole variety of gifts to discover this man's great wisdom. Well, there was an occasion about a year ago when they had to do a Bible reading in the congregation. The Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon. They gave that reading to me. They gave that, so I'm on the platform, basically playing the part of a woman visiting King Solomon. And
Oh,
again,
really?
yeah, again, I felt so humiliated, and I spoke, but in the week or two before the reading, I spoke to one of the elders and said, are the elders having a joke at my expense, giving me this? Because I knew I was going to do this reading, Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon. So I spoke to one of the elders, are they having a joke at my expense? And he said, no, 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 we're not. It was, there was nothing intentional. But it was like an accumulation of things. I went up on the platform, did the reading, playing the part of Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon. Again, after the meeting, I felt completely humiliated. Just left the meeting immediately. And they showed such incredible insensitivity and lack of caring to me over singleness and transgender that, it was just one of the things that convinced me this is not an organization that
Real love.
shows real love, compassion, kindness.
But let me ask you this: did you communicate your feelings about being transgender to the elders?
I told them when I returned, because obviously I told them about singleness, that singleness was the number one issue in my life. That was the thing number one.
Right.
But I told them that throughout my life,
You
I've
had those
had to
feelings,
deal
yeah.
with transgender feelings. So I was quite honest with them. I told them up front, these are the things I'm dealing with. And I hoped that they would show kindness and compassion regarding those two things. But in my experience, they didn't,
Right.
so I was left very, very disappointed.
Majority of them, I don't think they even know how to handle it, to be honest with you. Maybe we had those expectations that they should approach it with caring and loving, but I don't think they know how, because the love that they have is controlled and scripted and um, put in the box of policy, and they only showing the love towards people that they were told to show love and how to show love. They're not feeling love, they're doing love, if you know what I'm saying, right? So you didn't fall into a category where we can show you love and kindness. You just have certain issues we don't know how to deal with, so it's kind of a taboo. It's like with gay people, right? Same story. um, we I mean, I've seen gay people in the congregation, and even there was one a person in our congregation, and the elders, not one wanted to even say the word that this person is gay, because he was as good of a witness as you can imagine. He was serving in Bethel, pioneered, great speaker, like the best guy you can possibly imagine. But he was gay. You could look at him and right away. You don't have to talk to him. You have to ask him any questions. You just look at him and nobody had the courage to say that he's homosexual, right? When I said it out loud, everybody was like, well, we do know he's struggling with those feelings, right? Nobody wants to admit that that's who he is. It's just he has those feelings, right? Like, because it's hard for them to admit that, yes, some Jehovah's Witnesses are gay, right? They cannot obviously act upon being gay, but they are. That's who they are, and it's very difficult for them to say that these people are like that. It's, well, they have feelings, right? And maybe
Yeah,
Jehovah will remove
I
those
think,
feelings later.
yeah, I think basically the organisation sees everything in a very clear-cut way, don't they? Men are men, women are women, and there's nothing in the middle.
Right. And
And
what's so
it's
interesting? Another guy helped me to understand this. He said this. He's also gay, and I think he is Jehovah's Witness. But he told me this. They're telling me that in the new system, everybody will be straight, right? That there will be no gay people in the new system. So if I get to the new system and I'm gonna be straight, it's not gonna be me anymore. Like, if Jehovah changes me to be somebody else, it's not gonna be me. If he removes those and then puts different desires into my head, then it's not gonna be me. That's one. And then he says, imagine it was the other way around. Imagine we go into the new system and you become gay. I never thought of it. And then I'm like, I wouldn't even want to be in the new system, right? Either, because just the thought of it, okay, I don't want to be with a man. That idea just repulses me, right? So he says that's how I feel about being in the new system with a woman. Is like you becoming a gay in the new system and being with a man.
so the thing I
And
find,
for me, it was like, holy crap! How these people are suffering, right?
yeah,
Because they're,
I quite agree. And
you
yet,
know,
yet the organisation refuses to address these issues properly. I mean, I can only speak about the singleness and the transgender stuff, but as you said about gay people as well, that
right.
these are hugely important issues that the organisation will not address properly because they see things in a very clear-cut way. Men are men, women are women. There's nothing in the middle,
That's right.
and
That's right.
it's bizarre, but
It is. It is. So,
yeah.
well, those things, because it's one thing when people mistreat you, or in the congregation, you might have something against the elders or people, how they, their attitude towards you. But what about your beliefs? What about your, faith in the organization and the
I think
teachings
I
and
think
doctrines?
I think I think the second time I went back, as I said, I did 12 years the first time, 3 years the second. It felt very different the second time because there was a 16-year gap in the middle.
Right.
And the second time I went back, this is where the serious doubts started to set in very, very early on. That I think I'm in a cult here. But I tried to fight those doubts. I thought, no, maybe it's me just imagining it. I mean, one phrase I've come up of this I've encountered a lot recently is cognitive dissonance, where you literally think you're going mad. I can see all these things happening around me, and it's meant to be the truth, but is it the truth? The way the witnesses behave, the way they conduct themselves. So, the second time around, it began to feel more and more like a cult. There's no love here. There's no love here at all. And this is when the serious doubts started to set in with me. And I've got a whole, I'm just glancing down at my notes. There's a whole series of things here that occurred to me that when the serious doubts set in, that I think maybe I'm in a cult here.
But
And I can go through those if you'd like me to do so.
yeah, tell me a few, because usually the word cult for Jehovah's Witnesses is like, no, 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 we are not a cult. A cult is just some sort of small group in the middle of nowhere with a one leader that tells them the end of the world is coming unless you give me all your money. That's usually that's their idea of a cult. How is it that you came up with this
It was there was a
connection.
there was a number of things, Jack. You might hear me use the expression alarm bells ringing or red flags now in a minute, because the alarm bells are ringing over a lot of issues with me. The Watchtower study. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it should not be called the Watchtower study. It's Watchtower repetition, because they've got 20 paragraphs, and then I had a real issue with the Watchtower study. Early on, it was my favourite study of the week, but it was also my least favourite. So there might be 20 paragraphs in the study. The conductor, say for example, they're discussing a paragraph about hellfire, for example. The conductor would ask the question on that paragraph, and then he'd say to the congregation, there are 3 points in this paragraph that need to be brought out about hellfire. Well, my brain doesn't work like that. I'm not just going to repeat the 3 answers in the paragraph. So I would put my hand up and I'd give an answer about hellfire, maybe something I'd read in a book or something I'd seen in a television program or something I heard someone say. And the moment I gave the answer that was not mentioned in the paragraph, I could see the anger on his face, the irritation, the annoyance, and this happened a number of times because I wasn't following the rules. I wasn't
Yeah.
just repeating back the answer that was in the paragraph. So in the end, I could see the annoyance and irritation on his face. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to bother answering any of the questions in the Watchtower repetition, I'll call it. I'll wait till the end of the study. When they do the review box at the end, what the 3 points in the article, what,
Sure.
but yeah, so I decided at the end, I'll wait till they do the review box. And once they've finished the review box, they might have a couple of minutes at the end for general comments. And then I'll put my hand up and make a general comment. Well, that happened once or twice where I could make a general comment. But in the end, the timing of the Watchtower was so tight that they never had time at the end for general comments. And I could see how highly controlled, how tightly controlled the Watchtower study was, that they basically wanted me to repeat the answers in the paragraph. And I thought, I'm not having any of this. I'd rather stay silent during that meeting. So that was one of the red flags, one of the alarm bells for me.
Well, one of the reasons, I think, major reason why they got rid of the book study that we used to have in the middle of a week, because we used to have 3 meetings, and the book study was usually in a small group, and a small group sometimes was 5, 6 people.
Yeah.
Now, these 5, 6 people, they were studying maybe with one ministerial servant because that's all what they've got. They started questioning certain things, especially during the book of Revelation when they were studying. And it caused people to leave the organization. The entire book studies left because they're like, what, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense, because they felt more free to express how they felt about certain paragraphs or certain understandings. And the entire book studies left. And this is why they canceled the book studies and they joined them to have those book studies at the Thursday, or well, mid meeting with the congregation. And they even had one part on Thursday where it was, if you remember, Bible reading. So you read maybe 2, 3 chapters of the Bible, and then you discuss what's in it. And then people felt free to express what did they learn from these chapters. And then people from their own heart were expressing what they learned from the Bible. They removed it as well. They removed it because they didn't want people to express their own thoughts on the scriptures. Everything is so scripted right now that there is literally zero room for any type of self-expression. It's like, this is what we're telling you, and this is what you have to answer. So I remember when that was the time when I was leaving. The Bible part, when you discussed the 3 chapters of the Bible, usually 3 chapters, was my favorite part, because that was the only time we were allowed to think. And we're like, okay, I just read the chapters. Like, I'm gonna find something for myself that I find beneficial. I'm gonna share this with congregation based on what I read. There was no paragraph, no scriptures. I mean, no structure that would tell you what to say, what not to say. And I love that, right? And then later on, that was even removed. So people think, oh, they're doing things to improve. No, they're doing things to control more. And
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah, I mean,
what it's out of.
what you said, Jack, about the Bible chapters was probably my next point. Because do you remember in the old days when you probably delivered this assignment like I did? Do you remember the Bible highlights? It was like 6 minutes.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
and
that's what
and,
I was
and I
talking
remember
about. Yes.
back in the 90s, when I was a ministerial servant, You know, you'd be given the Bible highlights assignment, and then the brother delivering that assignment would say, well, just pick out a point of interest in the chapter and then apply it to the local congregation. So
Yes.
they basically left it to the brother doing the assignment. But I noticed now, this time around, going back, another worrying sign for me was the way the meeting is set up now. The brother that gives the opening talk on the midweek meeting now, you already know before he goes up on the platform which scriptures he's going to look at, because it's outlined for you. You know which scriptures he's going to look at, and you already know what the application is going to be, because
100%.
they've already told you at the end, this is the application. And you're thinking, you know, this is not right. You know, can't I read the chapters for myself and draw the conclusion? But so the brother that goes up to deliver that, I suppose I could call it an instruction talk, but it's more like a destruction talk. You know,
Hmm.
you know which verses he's going to focus on, and you know what the application is. So, what's the point of him going up on the platform in the first place?
Right.
Just
And it's
just
I think the last speech by Let about the beards was a
yeah
perfect example of them revealing what is the number one value for Jehovah's Witnesses, for the organization, because he not only told people, oh, now you can have beards, but he also told people how to react about this change. So
yeah
he would
yeah
say, this is an appropriate reaction and this is inappropriate reaction. So he's already telling people how they should and should not react to this change, not letting people react themselves and have their own opinion about it. Is like, this is appropriate, this is not appropriate. But what he said is the most important thing was obedience. It's not whether the shaving of the beard or not having a beard was right or wrong, or scriptural, not scriptural, or whether Jesus had a beard or not, or whether we had the right to tell people, you have to shave it or you're not gonna get the privilege. None of that was important. What was important, are you obedient to the slave? And that basically shows that it doesn't matter if you're right, wrong, whether it's true or not true, whether it's loving or not loving. All those things are irrelevant as long as you are obedient. And that was a perfect example of it,
yeah.
right?
And then you might remember the field service groups in the old days. That I can remember field service groups that were almost as long as the book study, because people
Yes.
would have 15-20 minute chat, and then they'd all hang around afterwards having a cup of tea or having a conversation.
Oh yeah, we've done it. Yeah.
Whereas now under the new arrangement, the field service group is 7 minutes. 7 minutes. The brother conducting the group reads something from the Bible, gives the application. He might ask a question and get a few replies. Then we're all out on the service
Yeah.
for the Watchtower Society. So that really troubled me as well. Field service group, 7 minutes in duration. It was just horrendous. So I don't know if you've got any feelings about that.
Well, it is their rules and their religion, and they decide whether they want
Yeah,
3 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. It's up to them.
yeah.
But tell me, what caused you to, as far as I know, disassociate?
Well, I'm coming on to some other stuff that really troubled me as well.
So go ahead, share that
Yeah,
with us.
there's a few. Forgive me, there's quite a few points I want to bring out here.
Go ahead.
I'm just glancing down at my notes. You know that, like the microphone. You know, when I was in the organisation the first time, you know, during the long chapter, you know,
Okay.
you might get one brother acting as attendant, and he just tap on my shoulder, Eamon, would you mind doing the microphone? I said, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. But now carrying the microphone on a stick has been turned into like a major privilege, you know. And I used to watch this performance in the Kingdom Hall, a brother going around with the microphone on a stick, 4 or 5 foot long, and it reminded me of the Olympic Games, because I don't know if you've seen the Olympic Games opening ceremony when all the countries are marching around the track and the opening ceremony. You get one of the athletes holding the flag, which is a big heavy flagpole, and you know, if you're a wise person, you hold the flagpole with two hands because it's heavy, you know. And that reminded me, but you get one athlete showing off will hold the flagpole by one hand just to show how tough he is. You know, I'm so strong I can hold it on one flag. And I saw the same kind of nonsense in the Kingdom Hall when the brothers were going around with the microphone on a stick, 4 or 5 foot long, holding it right at the end of the pole. Look, you know, look how tough I am. You know, I can hold this. And I was secretly praying to myself when they were doing that they'd give the microphone to an elderly brother or sister that would give a very long-winded answer, and then they'd go and drop the drop the microphone on a stick, you know. And you know, they've got a simple task elevated to an important privilege, you know, that, you know, you glance around and you see the brother holding the microphone stick and you think, oh, he must be a very, very spiritual man to be given a task like this. I'm thinking, what absolute nonsense, you know,
It's
that,
yeah,
you know, just, you know. But then just going on to some other things, you know, the quality of the speakers on the platform, because I like to see speakers with a bit of emotion, a bit of feeling. Well, I don't know if you found it when you were with the organisation that the speakers became more and more robotic. You
absolutely.
know, you'd listen to a talk, and if you asked me an hour after the meeting, what did that brother discuss in his talk, I couldn't tell you.
No,
It,
because they were
it
not
was,
speaking from the heart. They were speaking from an outline that somebody else prepared. It wasn't their talk. It was somebody else's thoughts
yeah,
and feelings and reasoning, and they were just going through it.
yeah.
And I remember when I tell you just quickly, when I woke up and I was still a PMO, I was still an elder, and I started changing my talks. And basically, I took the outline and I took, well, maybe 10, 15%, 20% max from it. And the rest I just spoke from my heart. And then one lady comes up to me and she says, Jack, I don't know what this is, but when you go up there, my brain wakes up. And the moment you go down, it goes back to sleep. It
Yeah,
was extraordinary for her to say that, right?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but she noticed this, and I don't think she was the only one.
Yeah,
Uh, and that's because when people speak somebody else's words, word for word, basically, it like you said, no emotions. It's very
yeah. And then,
robotic.
well, what one of the elders explained to me on one occasion, I think he was, you know, trying to promote himself. He was saying that at circuit assemblies, the speakers are graded a certain grade. You'll be given a certain talk on how good the circuit overseer, you know, perceives you to be. So it sort of dawned in my mind that if you're going to give a talk in the local congregation, you're robot level 1. If you're
Yeah,
given a talk at a circuit assembly, you're robot level 2. If you give a talk at a district convention, you're robot level 3. It's
yes,
all robotic. There's no feeling, emotion. And you might remember in the old days that they had the Theocratic Ministry School Guidebook when I was in the organisation, and I loved that book. It was like an actor's handbook, and
yeah,
I had so many notes and highlights in the book. I mean, my school guidebook was like a children's colouring book. I've made so many
yeah.
notes, and I can understand now why the organisation got rid of that book, because they didn't want brothers or sisters developing an individual personality. They
No,
just
no.
they just wanted robots. They just
Yeah,
wanted robots.
and many people don't know this, but on when you have a 3-day convention, the Friday is all manuscripts, so you reading word for word. You can't even say one sentence out of what's in there. So somebody else wrote it, and you just have to memorize it, basically say it the way it is. And the guy is there listening to you. And if you go off script just a little bit, his job is to kill the mic.
Well, well,
That's
well.
the level of control it is when it comes to giving
Yeah.
talks, right?
But that really disturbed me, the robotic speakers, you know. And you know that verse in the Bible, John chapter 3:16, with God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten son. And
Yes.
I've listened to talks with brothers reading that scripture, and there was no feeling or emotion in it at all. I mean, if I read that verse, I would slow it right down, you know,
Yeah.
I'd say, for God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten son. As I say, they read it in such a verses like that in such a robotic way, and that really, that again set the alarm bells ringing. What is wrong with this organisation? I'll just relate another story. On one occasion as well, we had a visiting speaker from Bethel. You know, while we were going through the lockdown, and you know, obviously all the meetings were on Zoom.
Yes.
So we had a visiting speaker from Bethel over a Saturday and a Sunday. So he did his talks, and then the congregation arranged like an afternoon of entertainment for him on Zoom. So I mistakenly thought, well, this will be nice and relaxed and cheerful and happy. So, you know, obviously someone would do some singing. You know, someone, you know, might play a musical instrument. Someone might read some poetry. The children might do some drawings or something like that. I thought this is going to be a nice little relaxed thing on Zoom. And I was asked to participate, and I volunteered. I said, okay, I'll do something. So I thought, well, I'll do some comedy. I'll do some funny stories, you know, about life in the world now, what life might be like in a paradise. So I prepared a whole list of material. I had about an hour's worth of material, funny stories that I was going to relate. So, you know, and I had to do a rehearsal beforehand, a few days before with one of the elders, and there was a younger brother there as well on Zoom. So I had an hour's worth of what I thought was funny material, you know, and I started off, and I was looking at the young brother's expression, and I could tell early on that he was enjoying what I was doing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I could see a smile on his face. He thought what I
Yeah.
was saying was quite funny. But the elder that was watching on Zoom, blank expression, stone cold expression on his face. And I just stopped and said to him, can I just ask you, how long have I got for my part in this afternoon of entertainment with a Bethel speaker? He said, you've got 3 minutes.
Mm.
And I thought, what? What? I was thinking to myself, I've got an hour's worth of material here. You're going to give me 3 minutes. And I was just horrified, you know. And I thought this was meant to be a relaxed little get together on Zoom to entertain the Bethel speaker. And I was going to call the Bethel speaker something light-hearted, like Mr. Bethelman or Mr. Bossman or something like that. And the elder said, no, you mustn't call him that. You mustn't call him that because he'll get offended.
Right.
Again, that was another alarm bell ringing with me, that even when they put on entertainment, it was so highly controlled.
But
I
Eamon,
think,
all those things, I get it. They're controlling, maybe not loving, but it's still not crossing the line when you know it's wrong, that it's not the truth. Because even if you read the Bible, the nation of Israel had tons of rules of what you cannot do during Sabbath, and punishments for it was really strong. But yet we all believed that it was, God's chosen nation. So what caused you to think that what they believe is wrong?
but it just again, I've got a few more points which hopefully I can share with you.
Go
But
ahead.
it was just this accumulation of little things: the Watchtower study, the opening talk, the field service groups, the microphones, the robot speakers, you know, the entertainment, how highly controlled it all was. And then my next major grievance with the organization was the how are you question. I don't know if you ever had that when you were with the organization. You know, they come up to you and say, how are you?
Mhm.
I hated that question with a passion, you know, because they don't know how to start a conversation. They come up to you in the Kingdom Hall and say, how are you? And I knew they were not interested in my well-being. You know, I was so tempted to say to them on occasions, oh, you know, I've had the worst day of my life. I feel like throwing myself under a bus. And then they'd say, oh, that's nice. Have a good day. Bye. You know,
Right.
they were not interested. And the how are you? I know, you know, it used to irritate me immensely
Yeah.
because these people are not really interested in me as a person. And if the elders use the how are you question, they're fishing for information. Because again, I don't know how
There
you
was some
felt,
of
because
it. Yeah.
I think you served as an elder. I narrowly avoided that, thankfully. You know, I mean, I was asked 20 odd years ago if I would be willing to serve as an elder, and I said no, because my brother was trying to kill me at the time, so I had enough on my
Yeah. You
plate.
didn't miss much,
But
man.
yeah, I did. But the how are you question really used to disturb me. And one of the elders said to me on one occasion that when someone used the how are you question with him, he used to look them straight in the eye to see if they were sincere, because he knew it was a question that lacked sincerity, you know. So for anyone that might listen to our conversation today, I would say to them, if any witness uses the how are you question with you, the alarm bell should start ringing. Are they
Right.
really interested in you, or do they have an ulterior motive? Are they trying to lead you somewhere else? You know, and it was so lacking in sincerity, and it really, really used to irritate me. I don't know if you've got any feelings about that.
Okay. So what was the next thing that really got you to think, boom, something's wrong here?
I was seriously troubled by the governing body. That was a major alarm bell with me, because in the 16 years I was away from the organisation, I discovered that they said they were not inspired, they're not infallible.
Hmm.
And, you know, if they're not inspired, not infallible, what gives them the right to control the lives of 8 million people? You know, and these 8 men claim to be acting on behalf of the true God. And I just did not believe them. And then they're using elders and circuit overseers as enforcers. The governing body decide the policy. The elders and the circuit overseers enforce it, you know. And then, you know, the arrogance of some of the governing body, you know, without mentioning names, like calling a newborn baby a sinner. You know, a little baby comes into the world as, I think
God's
you probably
enemy.
know.
God's enemy.
Well, a little sinner or an enemy. You probably know. You probably know what I'm referring to. You know,
That's right.
what right have you got to call a little baby a sinner or an enemy of God? You know, he's just he's done nothing wrong. And you know, I was just deeply troubled, and it just seemed to me that they were just making up policy as they were going along. You know, I could say a lot more on this. You know, maybe we'll get a chance to chat again in the future. But you know, and I thought, you know, and then just moving on now to when I disassociated, which was last month. You know, the straw that broke the camel's back, because I had been suffering quite serious depression. You know, some very dark thoughts going through my mind, suicidal thoughts. You know, but the straw that broke the camel's back was the Australian Royal Commission, you know, into child sexual abuse. And then when I discovered the Barbara Anderson story, you know, how she in America uncovered a massive child sex abuse scandal.
Yes.
And she was disfellowshipped by the organization, you know. And it just dawned on me, how can the true God possibly be using an organization like this that is protecting paedophiles?
Right.
You know, it just unbelievable. And then you know, you had Jeffrey Jackson, a member of the governing body,
Yes,
spoke in front of the Australian Royal Commission. And I think he used the phrase that it would be presumptuous to say that we are the true religion. And it just occurred to me, you know,
close to it. Yeah.
would the Apostle Peter or the Apostle John or Paul in the first century have denied that? They would have said, in the first century, they'd have said, yes, we are the true religion. And they'd have probably been taken outside, beaten, flogged, thrown in prison. And I thought, what a lack of courage from the modern governing body. They're covering up this massive child sex abuse scandal. And then they're you know, they won't come out directly and say we are the true religion. They say, oh, it would be presumptuous to say so, you know. And then, you know, there were all these things that were troubling me, the way the meetings were conducted, the way the governing body were conducting themselves, claiming, you know, that they can control the lives of 8 million people. And it came to a point last month where I thought, I've got to get out of this organization, you know. So I sent a WhatsApp message to the six elders in the congregation of 4 ministerial servants, basically saying I'm disassociating myself from the JW organization, Watchtower Society. I'm no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses representing the JW organization, Watchtower Society. And I was very careful to say in my message that it was the organization I had a real problem with. And in hindsight now, if I did it again, I think I would send the message to a lot more people in the congregation, because I had phone numbers for 20, 30 people, you know, because I didn't trust the body of elders, you know. And I'd say if I think you probably want to say something, do you?
And you, first time around, you just walked away.
Well, it was, I mean, my brother was trying to kill me the first time. So
right, it was a different reason, of course. But what I'm getting is you walked away. I'm assuming nobody was chasing you.
No, not really. No.
You just walked away. Why not do the same thing this time around? Why did you feel the need to write a letter?
Well, I disassociated via WhatsApp message, because this time it felt like a cult, because they were chasing me this time. They were trying to phone me, and I did not answer the phone calls. They were sending me messages. I did not reply to the phone messages, and it felt like a cult this time. They're trying to chase me, and I thought, I've just got to get out of here. Okay. And you know, but another tipping point for me was the disfellowshipping issue. You know, and I thought, how, you know, they claim that it's a loving provision, and there's no way in the world it's a loving provision, because I came across one account where an 11-year-old child was disfellowshipped. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. An 11-year-old was disfellowshipped. And I was thinking to myself, you know, imagine that 11-year-old might have been baptized the year before when they were 10. Was that 10-year-old told, you know, if you make a serious mistake in a year's time, you're going to appear in front of a judicial committee and you could be disfellowshipped. And I was just thinking of the consequences for an adult of being disfellowshipped. You know, that they might spiral into depression, they might lose their job, lose their home, marriage falls apart, kids taken into care, and then that person gets so overwhelmed with depression that they commit suicide. Those are the consequences that an adult might experience. So can you imagine how traumatic it would be for a child to be disfellowshipped? You know, and that horrified me when I discovered that. So why is the JW organization baptizing children? I mean, there are other religions that are baptizing babies, and that was a major alarm bell for me. You know, any organization that is baptizing children or any other organization is baptizing babies have nothing to do with them. Very, very serious, because the consequences aren't explained. And then just briefly on the account in Luke chapter 15 about the prodigal son, you know, how he went away to a distant land, squandered all his money, led a life of debauchery. And in the Bible, it says he came back. The father ran out, embraced him, you know, welcomed him back, brought him into his house, threw a big feast, a banquet for him, got the best robe in the house for his son that had been away. And that was unconditional love. Whereas if that was the witnesses now, the witness father would be standing outside the house with his arms folded, steam coming out of his ears, thinking, how dare you come back to my house after what you've done? You know, you've wasted all my money, you've lived a life of debauchery. And you imagine if in the second account the son came back, the elders would say to him, no, we're not letting you back into the house. You need to sit down at a table, write a letter to us explaining the reasons why we should reinstate you. So in the Bible account, in the Bible account, you see an example of unconditional love, but the way the witnesses don't interpret it like that. As far as they're concerned, it is conditional love, that you do things the way I tell you to do. You know, and it was a whole accumulation of things, the way the meetings were being conducted, you know, the behavior of the governing body, you know, although not inspired and infallible, they can control the lives of 8 million people. You know, the massive cover up of child sex abuse, how the organization is basically protecting paedophiles, the disfellowshipping procedure, which in my opinion is cruel and unloving. It's very, very cruel. So all of these things sort of came to a head for me, and I thought, I can't possibly be associated with an organization. It's so cruel and unloving. I've got to try and get away. And as I say, by the time I disassociated last month, I sort of made my mind up. I'm in a cult now, and I've got to get out, you know. And
how did you feel about it?
Well, I'll just sort of go on to my final thoughts now, Jack. You know, just a few ideas I've written down here, because the second time around it was much different to the first time. It really felt like a cult the second time, and I've had a bad experience in my life with two religions, because I grew up in a Roman Catholic church. I later became a witness, so I've had a bad experience with two religions. And I would just, as I come to a conclusion now, I would say to anyone that might listen to this interview that if you are involved in a religion, you need to ask yourself, is this religion making me happy? Is it making me happy? Do I enjoy going to the meetings? Do I enjoy associating with these people? So that would be my first point. Is it making you happy? You know, the religion that you belong to, does that religion show unconditional love, or does it show conditional love? Now, if I choose again to become part of an organized group, it would have to be an organization that shows unconditional love, because the witnesses clearly don't show that, you know. But I think the thing that really helped me was, you know, the witnesses take such a strong stand about apostates. Don't go looking for apostate information. You know, well, I'm sorry, I disagree, you know. And I would use a couple of illustrations. It's like you go out at night time on a clear night and you look up at the sky and you see the full moon. And you look up and you say to yourself, isn't that magnificent, a full moon? But you need to remember that the moon has a dark side. The moon has a dark side, and each organization has a dark side, you know. So I would encourage people, look at the dark side or investigate the dark side of the organization. And then, you know, from that great film, The Wizard of Oz,
Oh yeah.
Look behind the curtain.
Look behind the curtain. That's right.
Look behind the curtain, you know, because it's only when you discover the dark deeds happening in the background that you can really make a proper decision, you know. And you know, anyone that might watch this that is thinking or having doubts about the organization, I would say to them, you know, if you can't get over a wall, go under it, around it, or through it, you know. And then I was thinking also an illustration about my all-time favorite film, which is The Shawshank Redemption.
Mm.
You know, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen that
Oh
film.
yeah. More
The
than
man
once.
that the man that escapes from prison,
Prison.
wrongly convicted, spends 20 years in prison, but he eventually escapes. You know, and he has to pick the right night to escape on a night when there's a thunderstorm. So, you know, in a similar way, if someone's thinking of leaving the organization, choose your timing correctly. You know, why not send a WhatsApp message to as many people as possible that I'm going to disassociate? Or why not even disassociate in the meeting itself? You know, during the Watchtower study, you know, they think you're going to answer the paragraph, but you're not. When the microphone comes to you, use that moment to disassociate, you know. And like the man in the Shawshank Redemption, he finally got out. And I think the pipe that he escaped through, I think I remember it was about half a mile long. He crawled through a pipe out into the river to get free. When he came out, he was covered in all kinds of muck and shit and
Yes.
everything else, but he was out, you know. So anyone that's thinking about that, you know, try and get out. And I mean, as I sort of come to an end now, you know, in an ideal world, there would be no religion or politics, in my opinion. You know, it'd be just each individual could have a relationship with the sovereign of the universe. You know, you just cut out the middleman altogether.
Right.
I'll have a relationship with God, whoever he is. I mean, I still believe in God now, whether his name's Jehovah, Jesus, or whether he's part
Mm.
of the Trinity. I don't really know, you know, but you know, those are some of the thoughts. And I'll just say a little bit more that, you know, I've got loads of regrets. I think I've probably spent too much of my life helping other people and not enough helping myself. And I've arrived at the
Mm.
situation that I'm in now. So I can just imagine a time in the future if someone writes my obituary to say, you know, how would you describe Eamon? You know, he had a heart of gold, but a head of wood. You know, he always meant well. You know, I didn't always get things right. I made plenty of mistakes. And, you know, like you might remember the account about the Apostle Paul, who was originally Saul, who persecuted Christ's followers. You know, he thought he was doing right at the time. And
Yes.
then he got converted on the road to Damascus, became one of Jesus' greatest followers, you know. And
Yes.
I've made mistakes. I've offended people. I never intended to offend anyone, but I think if anyone was writing my obituary, they might conclude with the words that are often heard in Ireland, you know, forgive me for using a little bit of profanity here now, but they'd say the long and short of it with Eamon, as we look back on his life, he tried his best. He had a heart of gold, a head of wood, but the long and short of it, he was a fecking Egypt. If I can say that, you know, but I always tried my best. But and just finally, one of my great heroes is Marilyn Monroe. You know, the film actress. You know, I would love to have met her. I mean, she's so no longer with us, but in one of her films, she said that she always seemed to end up with the fuzzy end of the lollipop. You know, and I can go along with that. I think so far I've had the fuzzy end of the lollipop, but maybe whatever time I've got left, I might get the sweet end of the lollipop. So who knows? But forgive my rambling, Jack. But those are some of my thoughts today, and I hope maybe we'll chat again in the future.
No, great, and I appreciate. But I wanted to ask you just one more thought. What would you say to people who maybe are afraid of leaving, afraid of questioning, afraid of maybe they have some doubts in their minds, but there's enormous amount of fear because of the consequences of even asking the questions, being
I,
marked, being disfellowship? What would you tell them?
I think basically you've got to visualize taking on a bully. You know, because the one thing the bully can't stand is when you stand toe to toe for him, look him in the eye and say, I'm not going to be intimidated by you. You know, because, you know, I mean, one of the images that came into my mind, I mean, some people end up in front of judicial committees with three elders. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, maybe these three elders are window cleaners. You know, what right have you got to, maybe they can see through me, but, you know, what right have you got to sit in judgment of me? You know, you're imperfect just as I am. But if anyone is having doubts and wants to leave, I
Right.
would again refer back to the Shawshank Redemption example. If you've got to get out, you may be covered in all kinds of muck and everything when you get out, but just get out. You know, there is hopefully a better life for you in the future. Don't allow yourself to be intimidated. And I would encourage anyone out there, look behind the curtain. If you are having doubts, look behind the curtain. See the dark side of the organization, see what they're getting up to, because obviously they're only going to present the good image to the public, but there is a lot of dark things happening in the background that we all need to know about, you know. So don't allow yourself to be intimidated. Stand up to the bully, and if you want to get out, do it.
Do you think it was worth it?
I hope so. As I said, Jack, I've had a bad experience with 2 religions now. I still believe in a creator, but I'm going to have to start again. You know, who is he? Is he Jehovah? Is he Jesus? Is he part of the Trinity? But I still believe there is a loving creator, and I can't honestly believe that a loving creator would be using such a cruel, uncaring organization. And I've got to somehow try and put that experience behind me now and move on, and hopefully something good will happen in the future, you know. But
Oh, I'm sure of it.
I hope it will, you know. But I'm very grateful to you for allowing me the time to chat with you today, for inviting me on your channel, and I hope maybe we'll chat again in the future.
Thank you. And I hope that people listening to your story will also get the courage to share theirs, because so many people think, oh, what my story is not really worth much. You know what I mean? They don't want to share their story because they're thinking, so just like anybody else's story out there. But every story is unique, and every story that it's being shared, it helps people who are maybe questioning. There's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses watching this, and they have questions, and they're like, well, let me find out, why people are leaving. That was one of my questions. Like, if you know that this is the truth, why would somebody leave? And I never knew the answer to this. And when I came across some of the interviews like this one, then I'm like, oh, I always had those thoughts. I always had those feelings. And I always put them on the shelf. But there's more people who think like me, and there's more people who came to the same conclusions, and they found answers that I'm looking for right now. So every story, every interview is worth sharing. If somebody has the courage, then I tell people always share your story, because that's how we make sense out of this whole thing. It didn't go to waste. You said you had regrets for being in it for so long, but truthfully, now your story, your example, your history, your experience can be benefit to somebody else. Somebody else maybe is now 20, 30 years old, listening to you is like, you know what? I wanted to write the letter of disassociation for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and I didn't have the courage to do so. And I'm realizing I don't want to be 60 having those regrets. Right? So thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thank you.
Pretty sure you will inspire many people.
Thank you very much.